You're listening to the Results Driven Organizations podcast with Dr. Tanya Lowe, a podcast of curated conversations with C-suite leaders and those who support organizational growth and development. Get ready for inspiring interviews, educational lessons, and thought-provoking discussions that will challenge you to execute something new and innovative that will drive results in your organization. And now, here's Dr. Tanya Lowe.
Hello, you're listening to episode 005 of the Results Driven Organizations podcast with Dr. Tanya Lowe. Using my results-driven philosophy of strategy, leadership, teams, and customer experiences, I help organizations develop their best-kept secret, their human capital. In 2019, I released my second book, Results Driven Organizations, The 4 Keys for a High-Performance Workplace. This podcast is designed to expand the conversation with C-suite leaders and those who support organizational growth and development, and what it really takes to create, develop, and maintain results-driven and high-performing organizations. Today, we're talking with Cynthia Tidwell. Cynthia is the president and CEO of Royal Neighbors of America, one of the nation's largest women-led insurers. Her stellar reputation for turning around companies and reshaping them into viable businesses led her to the organization to perform a major business reinvention. Reversing declining trends and achieving record sales, under her leadership, assets have grown to over $1 billion and revenues are at an all-time company high while maintaining industry-leading financial ratios. She has received many notable recognitions and awards, and rightfully so. She is a woman of leadership and strategy. Cynthia, welcome to RDO.
Well, thank you for having me. It's so exciting. I love to talk about leadership.
Awesome. Great. Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. So I've shared your brief bio, and I'd love for you to tell our listeners about your journey to where you are now. Many times when people see you in magazines or on television, or they hear about you, they think, wow, they woke up as CEO. And you and I both know that that's not how that happens. So can you share a little bit about your journey to where you are today?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief. I get really excited about my journey because I think it's important for a lot of women to hear some of the keys that have gotten me into the actual top job of an organization. I went to school. First of all, I was the first one in my family to graduate college. I worked myself through college. I graduated, but I really didn't have a lot of guidance on what to study. But I was very good in math, very good in science. So STEM was just part of my innate ability, and I liked it. Yeah. So I took a lot of those courses, statistics, some business, came out with a very eclectic degree. And I also ran track during college. So I wound up, my first job out of school was in cardiac rehabilitation at a hospital in Arizona, which was one of the first cardiac rehabilitation centers in the country. So I'm sure you can see the trend between cardiac rehabilitation and insurance.
Absolutely.
Well, it didn't take me long in the medical field to know that if I wasn't going to go and get an MD, it was really going to be difficult to lead. Doctors run that world appropriately so. But I did learn a lot about influence in that job. We had a doctor who, it was a new center. He was a little risk adverse. So the staff finally figured out if we hinted around enough on an idea that we wanted to do, if we said, we think we should do this, he didn't like the idea. But if we planted the seeds
right,
and influenced, and then one day, this is my idea, great idea, let's go do it. We're like, oh, super idea, let's go do it, right? So sometimes you have to know your audience and know how to influence what you want. But I started my career because I had this medical background doing bodily injury claims for an organization. So if somebody got severely injured in an auto accident, I would handle their claim and work with, if they had an attorney, to settle the claim, because I had a knowledge of medical things and I could read the doctor's reports and that type of thing. That ultimately led into very sophisticated claims and litigation for accountants, lawyers, directors and officers. And when I was at that company, the CEO came to me one day and said, "We think you're high potential. What do you want to do in your career?" And as many women were kind of tunnel visioned into our functional specialty. So what did I want? My career aspiration at that point was, I want to run claims and litigation for the entire organization. And he said, "Well, I really would like my senior leaders to do a stint in the business, run a profit and loss line of business, even if they're going to be a functional leader."
Okay.
So this man basically changed my life.
Wow.
3 weeks later, he had me running a $100 million business in the company. And after doing it for about a month, I went back to him and I said, "Courtney, I kind of like this. So if I do well, I either want to be considered to run claims and litigation, or I want my own division to run the business." And he said, "Have at it, go." And I never did another claim or a litigated thing again after that.
Wow.
And so I would encourage people to take risks, jump into the deep end of the pool. More often than not, you'll swim. And if you don't, what is the worst thing that can happen? You go back and you do what you were doing before because you were good at it.
Absolutely.
And you may not like the new thing. There may be a lot of things, but running the outcome of the business was extremely exciting to me. And I had to learn as I went because I didn't know that side of the business at all.
Yeah.
It was a huge risk.
I listened to you share your story. I love that you're saying, take the risk. You don't have to know the outcome, but take the risk. And I believe that many women oftentimes are afraid to take that risk without knowing what's going to be on the other side. I always think that if I take the risk, if it's not the opportunity I want, I'm going to learn something, I'm going to gain some experience, which will help me down the line. And so for women who are listening, I also encourage you to take that risk and take control of your career, because that's what I'm hearing you say. You had a vision.
You are in control of your career.
Yeah.
I went and I ran that business, and then I got a call from a company that, because the claims and litigation experience I did was very specialized, and there were only a handful of people in the country that really were qualified to do the type of work that we did. And this was a competitor company, and they wanted me to come and run their whole claims and litigation area.
Wow.
So I decided that I would go talk to them, and they offered me the job, and I turned them down because I told them that I didn't want to go back and do what I was doing before. If I make a change, I want a new opportunity. I want to continue to grow. I want to continue to push myself. And I referred the person they ultimately put in the claims and litigation job, a friend of mine. And so they called me back about a month later and said, "We want you." And they gave me a region to run on the business side.
Okay.
I was the first woman in their 120-year history at the time that they ever brought in to run a region. And not only that, we were moving it from one part of the country to another. So here I am, brand new, don't really know anybody. How when you're doing something significant, you pick up the phone, you've got relationships. They
Absolutely.
said, give me some black belts to help me with process and some training manuals. And they go, we don't have any of that. Okay. So we hired 120 some people over a 6-month period and brought up a whole new region for the organization while we had to continue doing business.
Wow.
And it was an area that I had never done before.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that. I ran that. And then I got promoted to run. So I was doing a region in the Midwest. Then I got promoted to run that business nationwide. It was an Allianz company. And I was in that role for, I don't know, maybe 5 years or so.
Okay.
And that was a company that was really unclear of its overall strategy at the top. We had 4 major businesses and I ran one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And they kept turning over the top CEO, and they could never get traction on a strategy because they never stuck with anything long enough.
Mm-hmm.
But my business, when I do turnarounds. So if things are distressed, I go in and I hire, fire, reshape it, do the strategy, figure out what we need to do. And in my previous roles, I would do that. And then they'd, get an experienced manager to run it. And then they'd pick me up and drop me somewhere else to fix it up and clean it.
You clean it up.
And that's another thing, women sometimes are a little fearful for those assignments. Mm. And my view has always been 9 times out of 10, it can only go in one direction.
Absolutely. I agree.
You put some grit into it. And, every now and then I would come across a business that we either needed to divest from and sell off, or it was just so broken and not consistent with the overall company strategy that, you're better off saying, let's sell it for its parts, or let's do whatever we have to do,
right.
Blah, blah, blah. But most of the time when I've done a turnaround, and there's very specific things to do for a successful turnaround, but there's only one way it can go. I mean, when it's at the edge of the cliff, and you bring it back. So I would encourage women to take those challenging assignments. They're lots of fun. It requires tremendous amount of complex thinking, prioritization, decision-making, to really have a successful turnaround. And then you go from turnaround to reinvention. All right, so you got to fix and make sure that you're going to reinvent off a solid base. You want to build your house on concrete, right? Not sand. And then when you're confident that that has occurred, then you can really get heavy into reinvention mode and the next curve for the business for true business transformation.
And that's when it really takes place.
So then I got to Royal Neighbors. So I left that role of running that business nationwide. It was a big business. It was a huge business. And I had an ill family member, so I decided to take some time to do what I needed to do as a daughter. And then when I was decided, well, I'm probably a little too young to not do anything, I was looking for something else. And the Royal Neighbors opportunity came to me. And so here's another thing. I had never done life insurance and annuities. I'd only done property casualty, and while they're insurance, and insurance is kind of an insurance, how you make money in those two businesses is very, very different.
Okay.
And somehow I convinced them to hire me, and I had to learn. That industry while I was turning around the company at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was super exciting. It really was. I really find my energy. I was doing a panel with Jim Collins, the author of Good to Great.
Yes, love him.
And we were talking about turnarounds, and he said, "Don't you find that work just exhausting?" And I said, "No, for me, that's where I find my energy."
Mm-hmm.
More messy and complex, the more fun I have with it.
Because you have an opportunity to really get in and transform that organization, those departments into something great. It takes some work, but when you can see that vision, it is exciting.
And it takes time, and it takes people, as you suggest in your books. Things get done through the people that you hire, and how do you convince them that your vision is the right vision for the future? And then how do you get them excited so that they do things they never thought they could do before?
Yeah. That's leadership, when you can really inspire people on your team to move beyond to places they never even thought they could go, but you take them there.
I've read you just walk through a bookstore, there's aisles and aisles of leadership books and magazines, and my yardstick to measure it is turn around and see if anybody's following you.
Yes.
Because you can have the title, and you can have the authority, and you can have, all these degrees to the nth, whatever. But if nobody wants to follow you, I will argue you're not a leader.
Yeah. You're just taking a walk, as John Maxwell says.
Yeah.
You're just taking a walk if no one is following you.
So,
wow. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that journey. Now, Cynthia, you also did a stint at Xerox as well, correct?
Well, when I talked about my early time with the CEO who really got me on the new path, that was a Xerox financial services company.
Yes. Okay.
So from there, so he let me run a business, and then Xerox wanted to divest from the insurance business. So we were part of the insurance business of Xerox Financial Services. So then I worked with the team they had about 5, it was a long time ago, 5 insurance businesses. And we had to separate them all out and separate their financials all out so that a potential buyer could look at each company individually. Mm-hmm. It took about 2 years to kind of repackage the organization in order to make it so that investors could understand what they were really buying.
Right.
And I was really blessed at that stage of my career to work with all of the top people and be part of that team to figure out the strategy, figure out how to separate everything out, sit in the investor dog and pony shows as they came to look at the different businesses. And we actually were able to spin all of the businesses off. The main business that I was closely tied to was bought by GE Capital.
Okay.
And then once it went to GE Capital, I really wasn't drinking their Kool-Aid very much, for a variety of reasons. I'm sure it was great for the people who wanted that culture.
Yeah.
And then that's when I went on to the Allianz company. That's when they reached out to me.
Okay. 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 Wow. Wow. So I'm going to switch gears for a little bit. Well, it's not really switching because it's still in the same vein of leadership. What do you believe is the biggest leadership challenge today in general, and then the biggest leadership challenge for women?
Well, COVID has, 2020 was a pivotal year for a lot of reasons. A lot of things were going on in our country.
Mm-hmm.
We were dealing with a pandemic. So when you could just walk up to somebody's desk and have a conversation or have a little inspirational discussion or ask them about their family or their new pet or whatever was going on in their lives, much more difficult in this environment. And then you layer on the social justice issues that just exploded in 2020, along with there were just so many things
Yes.
that were occurring in 2020 that leaders had to deal with. I think the biggest leadership challenge now, and I think this has been it for, at least for me, I spend a lot of time on alignment. So making sure that the senior team is all marching in the direction that we agreed to. Because I find that people's attention span is about 60 days, right? So we huddle, we make our plans, we get together, and everybody goes, and then they start to,
Yeah.
Well, I want to do this for finance, and I want to do this for sales, and I want to do this. But, you pull a lever here, and it has ripple effects in other parts of the organization. So I've developed a great rhythm with my team, my direct reports, where we are very aligned.
Mm-hmm.
And then that cascades through the organization. So I think alignment to actually execute results is huge. And then cascading communication is difficult. It's the game of telephone when we were little. Remember, we'd start on one end and you'd get to the last person and it was incomprehensible from what you just said.
Yes.
Well, that happens in organizations all the time, because no matter three people can be in a room and hear the same thing, and they're all going to walk out with some slight different version of what they heard.
Yep.
And then it goes through the next layer and the next layer, and it changes. So we spend a lot of time on communication. And I try to encourage management to explain why. Not just we're doing this, or we've changed this procedure, or we've made this decision, but why are we doing it? Now, people may not agree, but at least they'll understand that there was some, method to the madness.
Right.
We just didn't willy-nilly decide to make some decision.
Right. And that's always the question. Why are we doing it this way? Why? People want to know the why behind the what.
Absolutely.
Yeah. They want to know the why behind the what.
So I think, 2020, extremely challenging. I think 2021, it started out kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So I think 2021 is going to be as tough a leadership year, because I shouldn't say everybody's used to COVID, but the newness of it all
Yes.
is behind us. And now, I mean, people understand variant strains and vaccines and lockdowns and blah, 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 blah. But I think it's still going to take us through 2021 to hopefully get back to some sense of normalcy. Our business did great in 2020. We were extremely blessed. We hired people. We had no layoffs. We hired, I think, 16 people throughout the course of the year. We raised our revenue to an all-time high. We grew our life business over 20%. I mean, we had, and everybody was working from home for the most part. We've got a very dedicated core group that is in the office, making sure everything else is running so everyone else can work from home, and they're awesome. But 2021, I think, is actually going to be more challenging for us. This surge that we saw in December through February was significant in terms of death claims that we got, because we're a life insurance company.
Right.
Much higher than what we had predicted, because no one was predicting that winter surge in September or October when we were planning for 2021. So, and just making sure that we're doing right by people. We've given people a lot of flexibility during this crisis, because they either have children at home or they have comorbidities and they're worried about themselves, or they have someone at home with comorbidities or comorbidities, that underlying health condition. So when we looked at the universe of employees, it was almost 2/3 of the employees fell into one of those three categories. Right. So to start bringing people back when so many people were concerned about coming back, they're still working from home even now.
Was your organization an organization that, did you do any teleworking or work from home stuff prior to COVID?
You know what was really interesting? In 2018, we did a business continuity plan exercise around a pandemic. We do one every quarter. So we've done, a shooter in the building, reputational risk, cyber. We take these different risks and say, okay, if this happened, now the likelihood is extreme, but if it happened, it would be significant. How would we respond? What would we do? Would we be ready? And we found when we did this tabletop exercise in 2018 that we did not have everything in place if we had to deploy people rapidly to home. And we were thinking it more in terms of, what if half of our workforce got sick and couldn't work? But we also learned that if we couldn't get in the building, or we didn't have all the technology in place. So we spent a good part of 2019 shoring that up.
Wow.
So luck, you need to do business continuity planning. You need to do that.
Yeah.
And because we're a life insurance company and we existed during the great influenza of 1918, the Spanish flu,
right, we
decided that's, close to 100-year event. So we just picked it as something that would impact our business because it's life insurance.
Right.
Very specifically. So when it hit in 2020, we had everybody deployed within 3 days.
Wow. So what I'm hearing is, leaders, you need to make sure you have a risk management plan in place, because I know many companies struggled with what do we do now? Many companies struggled with, before COVID, having their teams work from home. It was totally out of the question. And now they're liking it. They're seeing that, okay, we can trust you to get your jobs done. Um, and I just think about, if they'd had a plan in place, if they'd even talked about it, if they'd even entertained it the way you all did, and you called it a continuity plan.
Business continuity.
Business continuity
It was
plan.
part of our overall risk management program.
Yes.
We've got a whole team, because every now and then something happens where, it could be anything.
Yeah, weather.
The building shut down, whatever. So we've got this crisis group.
Yeah.
And so if we can't get in the building, how do we communicate with each other? How do we talk? How do we blah, 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 blah. What's really interesting, though, I had a couple of senior leaders that were very hesitant pre-COVID to hire remote workers.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't even like hiring people in our Mesa office because they couldn't see them every day.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, this experience, they've done a 180. They've done a complete 180.
Yeah.
They see that this, if you hire good people, they will work.
And that's what it goes back to. That you shouldn't hire people that you can't trust. You should look at their track record of what they're doing when they're in the office. Why would you think that they're not going to do these things when they're outside of the office? And I've heard that so many times. I've heard some of our clients and some companies that we were planning to work with, they were really struggling around, how do you manage remote workers? How do you manage remote teams? And I'd hear people say, we're on these 6-7 hour Zoom calls just so people can watch us.
Oh,
yeah. I've heard some crazy things, Cynthia. But with that being said,
we had to do a little bit of training for our middle managers, and we're still doing some training, because as we plan return to the office, we're going to create a lot more flexibility than what people had pre-COVID, because I think for a lot of people, that's a good thing. But not everybody wants to work from home.
No.
And there are advantages and disadvantages. You want to keep the culture, you want to keep collaboration, mentoring, training, visibility. Hey, I'm here, promote me, type stuff. Particularly for younger workers starting in their career, because you learn a lot by watching management or senior leaders, and you start to develop what you like and what you don't like about what they do as you're creating your own personal brand and identity. So we're going to try to do a mixture.
A lot of these things take place in the office.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So our board of directors has done virtual calls now for about a year. And what I find is, without the dinners and the breakfasts and the breaks, you're only covering what's on the agenda in our meetings now. And there's so much rich conversation and learnings from those other events that probably don't quite make it to the agenda.
Right.
But, we're doing this and we're doing that. And, what's your perspective on XYZ? Because we're thinking about something. You don't really have that opportunity anymore. So I'll be looking forward to more face-to-face time with the board.
Very
good. So we have to create it in the company. We're doing our happy hours and trivia, and just bingo. Just all kinds of nonsense.
You have to get creative.
Get people together.
Yes.
To be able to chat and We've commented on, different people's wallpaper in their house and who gets the prize for the wildest wallpaper.
Yeah. Yeah. So in the same vein of leadership, my biggest leadership challenge when in my career was truly embracing the team concept, because I'd always been a team of one and I loved it. People would call me and say, "Hey, we just got this grant, or we just got this funding, and here's the notebook. Can you develop it?" Or, "Hey, we need someone to oversee these statewide projects." And I was always a team of one. But I realized that you can't run an organization or a department with that mindset. I learned the hard way, and I talk about it in my book, about challenges of being a team of one. We're not really oftentimes trained to develop other people. So can you think about a time, um, or tell us about a time of your biggest leadership challenge? How did you identify it, and how did you conquer it? And then how do you model it today in your organization?
Well, let me answer that two ways.
Okay.
First of all, when you're an individual contributor and you keep getting promoted and you keep doing well and you keep doing, you think that your way is the way
Yes.
because it's made you successful.
Yes.
But when you move from individual contributor to leader, now your goal is to get quality work done through others.
Yeah.
Not you. You set the tone, you set the parameters, you need to know they need to know the box in which they can maneuver in. And then you've got to let them kind of figure it out. I had to learn that if I wanted something done, I would approach it this way.
Mm-hmm.
But I might have somebody on my team who thinks very differently than me, their thought process, and they want to approach it this way. Now, I think this way is ridiculous and too long and takes a lot of steps and so you coach and you mentor, but at the end of the day, if they come out of the tube with what we need,
right,
you got to give them the freedom to get their way.
Yeah.
And that's really hard when you've been successful doing it your way.
Absolutely.
But it is a transition that individual contributors need to make to be good leaders. So just because you have subject matter expertise doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a good leader.
Yeah.
Those are different skill sets. They're very different skill sets.
Very different. Very different. When I go into companies now and I when I see myself in other people, because I'm like the team cheerleader now. I'm like, no, you need to strengthen your team. You've got to work with your team and develop, their potential. And that's where they struggle. They struggle with, I've gotten here. And yes, you're here in this place, but guess what? You've got people who they need to know what you know. They need to know that you can develop them to greatness, and you've got to trust them to do it. So it's a little of kind of pulling back on the reins, and definitely allowing yourself to be a part of the team. In all of my departments and companies that I worked in, I never had that opportunity no one ever talked about, they don't talk about development in government. It's just like, here's the job, go and do it. And now we know that it really does take development to create and multiply more leaders in an organization. I love the quote that Bill Bradley says, leadership is unlocking people's potential to become better. And so that's what I think about when I think about people who struggle with their leadership ability around teams, or they're having team challenges. Is what can you do to make the people on your team better?
People are people. We're not all going to agree. I've worked with a lot of people that I don't necessarily want to go out and have a glass of wine with. And
exactly.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So we put a lot of own time and effort into development of people if they want it.
Yeah.
If they want it. So as I always felt I was in charge of my career.
Mm-hmm.
I was in charge. I needed to let the people above me know what I wanted and then ask them what kind of experiences can they give me to get what I need to go where I want to go. And I always found that very effective. But we've spent a lot of time on development. And right now, my senior management team, I have 6 direct reports, and 5 of them came up through the company.
Awesome.
And we're not a huge company. We don't have thousands of employees. But it was a very, some of it was throwing people into the deep end of the pool. But I knew in my heart that they were going to swim. Some of it was rotational assignments. And so I'm very proud of that fact that, and 4 of the 5, when they came into the organization as middle managers, came from other industries. So we somewhat organically started to change the traditional mindset of a stodgy old insurance company to more contemporary thinking by bringing these people from other industries, teaching them insurance, but they took some of their more progressive ideas on digital transformation and product design and process. And it started to shift the culture of the organization. Insurance right now, you hear a lot of, well, we've set up this innovation area. And people dump a bunch of money in it, and it's these people that the rest of the company kind of sort of really they don't know what they're doing. And then something pops out of the box, and you expect all these people who have not been part of the process to then try to go execute it. Well, we've tried to integrate all of that.
Okay.
So when I talked about us growing 25% during COVID, we had been on a digital transformation for about 5 years. So what do I mean by that? Life insurance, somebody sits across the table from you, they fill out a paper application, it goes to the company, they go through the underwriting process. That may take up to a month. And then if you've got insurance or not. Well, we digitized it, electronic applications, electronic decision-making. So while the agent was sitting with the client, we were running things in the background.
Wow.
Getting their prescription history and different things for us to make an underwriting decision.
Right.
But for the majority of our agents, when they're either with a client or when they couldn't sit with a client and had to do it in this type of environment, by the end of the process, on most of, not all, but a lot of the business, we could tell them immediately if it was a yes or no. And then the things that we couldn't give them a yes or no on, about 90% of everything we wrote, we could give them an answer within 48 hours.
Okay. So cut that wait time.
So when COVID hit, an agent and a customer both want to know as quickly as possible, I mean, people don't get up in the morning and say, oh gosh, let's go buy some life insurance. Right? I mean, they might say that about a TV or a new pair of shoes or,
but not life insurance.
Children, but it's extremely important and people need it, but it is certainly not top of mind. And it can be confusing.
Mm-hmm.
And there are many, many great trusted agents out there that can help people meander through it, but they want simplicity to the process.
Right.
So we spent a lot of time on process, and that enabled us to continue to write and actually pick up market share during the pandemic.
Wow. Cynthia, I sit on the board of the National Association for Advancement of Women in Insurance. I've been a board member I've been on this board for 2 years. It's run by a really good friend of mine, Bernice Oliver, and I help them. I provide leadership training and things of that nature. And one of the things that I told Bernice that I was going to be talking with you today, and I said, if you had a chance to talk with Cynthia, what would you ask her? And they just finished an executive roundtable for women in insurance, and it was on diversity, equity, inclusion. And so my question is, what are the challenges for diversity in the insurance industry, and how can the insurance industry be more of an ally to diverse hiring and advanced opportunities?
Oh, I think it's a great question, a very timely question. And diversity is many things. Mm-hmm. So the one thing you need to know about Royal Neighbors is it was founded 125 years ago by 9 women.
I know, I saw that.
So we're a fraternal insurance company, which means we provide valuable life insurance and annuities, but we also do a lot of philanthropy and social good in the communities where our members are. Either our members volunteer, our policyholders, our members volunteer 258,000 hours in their communities last year.
Wow.
And then we give discounts, medical discounts. We have a women's signature empowerment program called Nation of Neighbors, where each year we give $10,000 grants to women doing extraordinary things in their communities, either nonprofits or starting a business or, whatever the case. If you go on our website, you'll see all kinds of very, very inspirational stories. It's just amazing to me what people are doing in the communities. So we have always, one of our common bond is women's empowerment. So we have always been very focused on equity for women in the workplace.
Very good.
Well, obviously, we've got a diverse workforce, and it mirrors the population and where our businesses are, but there is more that we can do to make sure that our talent is evolving in all different kinds of diversity ways. There's gender, there's race, there's sexual orientation, exactly. And there's age, there's generational, it's so multifaceted. And, I'm a firm believer of diversity of thought. If we both think the same way on everything, we don't need one of us. If everybody thinks the same, it's really easy to get things done. But the decisions are very narrow.
Yeah.
When you have diverse thinking, and that means diverse people, decisions are a lot harder, but they're going to be better. So I do believe that the insurance industry believes with all its heart that diverse organizations are good business.
Yeah.
And you have to start there. You have to believe that, or all of these efforts and programs are going to just die. So I just took my senior team through unconscious bias training. We did it.
Very good.
We're going to roll it out to the organization. And I said, before we do that, let's do it and let's go through the discussion guide with us. And then I want my leaders to do it with their management, and then let's roll it out to the whole organization. Because there's all kinds of bias.
Absolutely.
Unconscious bias is just one particular area that I think, I'm sure you have experienced it. I have experienced it. I don't know what it's like to be a Black female in the United States, but I know what it's like to be a female in a male-dominated industry.
Yes.
Who, when I came into the industry, had 0 women in management. And so anyway, we took the team through it, and I asked the team, because we have some white males on the team.
Yeah.
I said, can you relate to any of this? Can you relate to some time, I call it feeling marginalized, when you felt marginalized to the point that you shut down? Because that's what happens.
Yeah. You
get marginalized, and then you don't even speak or have a voice or contribute. And it was interesting. They all told me that they did in some way or another. And then I asked them, I said, was it just a couple paper cuts? or was it, the paper cut that goes over and over and over and over again till suddenly you have this big gaping hole in your hand. And I would say for most of them, it was somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
But certainly not quite the same for some of my diverse leadership members. And so it was an interesting conversation. And I think it was eye-opening to everyone on the team on how some of this stuff happens.
Yes.
Unconsciously.
Unconsciously.
Right? That's what we're talking about. If it's conscious, then we got a whole different problem. Right?
Yeah.
So it was eye-opening, and luckily this training that we went through gave some techniques and some things that you could look at to try to monitor if you were doing this. And I told them, I said, going through a couple training sessions is not going to get rid of unconscious bias in the world. It exists. It's how the brain operates. It's a scientific proven fact that your brain operates that way to speed things up, and it draws on past experiences. To make decisions. So, but if you're aware that you might be doing it, you can pull yourself up and look at it differently. So we're going down that path. The insurance industry, one of our industry groups for life insurance, became part of the CEO Action Pledge.
Okay.
CEO Action Pledge is a kind of a organization. I think it was pulled together by PricewaterhouseCoopers. I believe that's who did it. And there's probably about 1,500 different corporations who have now taken this pledge. And in life insurance, almost all of my contemporaries that I know have taken it, and we have taken it. So it's really around, how do you create a safe environment for difficult conversations? How do you get after this bias in the workplace? How do you learn from each other and share best practices? And then how do you engage your boards on this very important strategic topic? So we're building, we've always had a diversity plan, but we've pulled it back out and we're making refinements. And I actually pulled together a culture team within the company on this topic so that they can just help with what is important to them. How can we, create a more inclusive culture for everyone? So we're kind of going after it multi-pronged. And, with things like this, just like COVID, sending people home, no matter what you do, somebody is going to think it's either not enough or it's too much.
Or it's too much. Yeah.
So, but we've got to do, so my goal is, there's a huge societal issue. Royal Neighbors is not going to be able to solve that. But we can do our part to make sure that Royal Neighbors is a vibrant business with rich diversity, and that we mean what we say and we walk the walk.
I think that is so important. I commend you and your organization for having the training, for pulling these groups together and creating this safe space to have conversations. It's about awareness. If I'm aware that things that I say may be offensive, then I need to know that so I can be mindful of it. I was just in a training this past week, and they were talking about a video that was shown, and someone was offended because of some of the symbolisms that were used that are not used in the Chinese culture. And the person that was teaching the training was like, oh my God, in all of the research, how did I miss that? And she did not become offended, oh my God, why are you calling me out? But she wanted to know more. She wanted to learn more. And I think if we have that mindset of, I want to know more about you, I want you to know more about me, I think we'll start to create a place where there's less offense and more understanding and more awareness. And so I love it when organizations are taking a stand, a true stand, not just on paper, but they're doing something to look at overall diversity with age, gender, sex, religion, race, all across the board. Because what we do know is that diversity helps organizations function well, because you've got those different thoughts, different ideas coming to the table, not the same old. Whenever I go into an organization and they say, we've done it this way, we've always done it this way, we're going to always do it this way, there's a problem there. There's a problem.
Particularly in today's world, everything's 24/7 and it's changing at record-breaking speed. It's just, you can't. And one person can never have, if you think you have all the answers, then you're really a fool.
Yeah. Yes.
Because you can't. There's no way.
Yeah.
I hire people in their subject matter expertise who are way smarter than I am in what they do. And that's what we need.
Yeah. That's what we should want. To have people on our teams that know way more than we know.
And I'm always learning. I'm learning every day.
Yeah. Every single day.
But I'm a lifelong learner. And super inquisitive.
Yes.
Yes. People don't always appreciate. why do you ask so many questions? Because I want to know.
Yes,
You know?
yes. The more questions, John Maxwell has a book, Good Leaders Ask Great Questions, right? And so the more questions we ask, the more we're going to understand about processes and why are things done this way. And we're going to understand more about people in our organizations and our clients and our people who consume our products. I heard someone say every morning he puts on his beginner's cap. And that beginner's cap helps him to not, it's to have that mindset of, I want to learn something new today. I don't have all the answers. And this beginner's cap helps him to start that day. So he's open to new ideas, new people, new innovations. And I wrote it down. I have it on my desk somewhere, beginner's cap. Am I wearing my beginner? He actually had a beginner's cap, but I love the concept behind that. Being a lifelong learner and not being so connected to my way. My way is not good. My way may be the best way for me, but it's not, it may not be the best way for the organization. So
one of my personal, everybody, when you're in these jobs, you've got to have kind of your own personal list of things that keep you from going crazy. Mm-hmm. But one of mine is every day I go out and I learn something new.
Yes.
I do a lot of other things, but I'm just a ferocious reader. And, if you're not growing, you're dying. So
absolutely.
We've got to keep. And then that spurs. Why are we doing it that way?
Yeah. So, Cynthia, this has been amazing conversation. I knew I was going to enjoy it. What are you reading that we should be reading?
Well, I love to read, and a lot of last year was reading medical report because we're in the life insurance industry, mm-hmm. right? I was reading all the epidemiology studies, and which I would not recommend people spend time on. But I read The Great Influenza by John Barry, and that is the account of the Spanish influenza in 1918. And very insightful. Now, influenza viruses are a little different than coronaviruses, and mm-hmm. they talk about the science, they talk about the state of the medical profession in the United States at that time. We were in a world war. The approach that the country took or didn't take around the influenza, the number of people, that was devastating.
Right.
The lowest estimate is 50 million people worldwide died when the world population was about a third of what it is today. So it was incredible. So it gave me a lot of insights into what to expect as we emerged out of it, because it went on for about 3 years.
Oh.
Yeah. And they had different waves, and each wave got less severe. But so anyway, there were a lot of parallels that helped me in my leadership journey throughout 2020. So I would recommend that if anybody likes the STEM stuff, the science part and all of that. Team of Rivals, which has been out for a long time. Doris Kearns Goodwin. This is about Lincoln when he was elected and the team he formed. And many on that team were rivals of his throughout the years. So why did he do it? How did he do it? And then what manifested out of this bringing, so you talk about diversity, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're bringing a lot of people who really didn't think like he thought, because they were actually rivals at another time in their life. So that is a very interesting book. And then this book's been around for a while now. And I've got it on my iPad. So when I'm on a plane, I tend to reread it because it's a fascinating Sapiens.
Sapiens. Okay.
Sapiens. So it's called Sapiens, The Brief Human History of Mankind.
Oh.
So it talks about, at the time of evolution, Homo sapien was just one type of human that roamed the earth. You look at dogs now, there's all these different variety of dogs.
Right.
And not one has emerged as the dog. But with sapiens, there were different types of sapiens, humans.
Mm-hmm.
But Homo sapien did emerge as the sole. Now, we've taken on all kinds of different diversity in addition to that. But when you look at the genetic makeup of all the other breeds, if you will, Homo sapien evolved. So that it goes into that, and then it goes into how Homo sapien has evolved over the years, all the way from the caveman days to the agricultural revolution to where we are today. So today we're at a crossroads from evolutionary design, right, over the years, to now with data and artificial intelligence. So you go from evolution to what's the word I'm actually looking for? Intelligent design. We're at a point now where scientifically, if we wanted to, we could create people like we want them created. So where does humankind go from here? So you can see I have a very eclectic reading list, but I love historical things that can give me perspective on today. And I don't agree with necessarily everything in that book, but it is extremely thought-provoking. Very thought-provoking. A lot of history that I didn't know about the evolution of societies around the world. So anyway, I would encourage people, if they're into that type of thing.
Wow. Well, you've given us 3 amazing books that we will add to our show notes. Guys, we've been chatting with Cynthia Tidwell, President and CEO of Royal Neighbors of America, one of the nation's largest women-led life insurers. Visit the show notes where you can learn more about Cynthia and Royal Neighbors of America. Grab a copy of Results-Driven Organizations, The 4 Keys to a High-Performance Workplace, and our special gift to you for being a valued listener. Until next time.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Results Driven Organizations podcast with Dr. Tanya Lowe. Be sure to review the show notes for the resources mentioned, and don't forget to grab your free gift available at freegiftfromtanya.com. Until next time.